welcome to All Business Media TV. I'm your host, Rick Delgado, and our guest today is Katherine Myers. She is the owner at the Resiliency Counselor. You can find out more about her at her website, resilienccounselor.com, or give her a call, 937-405-5795. And again, welcoming to the show, Katherine, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well, and thank you again for joining us. We've talked before. This isn't our first go-around, as they say, right, Katherine?
That's right. It isn't.
But tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your company real quick before we get started.
My company is Resiliency Counselor. I'm actually the Assistive Technology Specialist for Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. And Resiliency Counselor comes out of the experience that I've had at Wright State working with students, along with personal experience that I've had dealing with my son, who's quadriplegic, and dealing with my husband and his illness, along with my own personal experiences with my own disability and illnesses that I've had.
Right, and all the challenges that we've, kind of gone through the last few times we've talked to each other.
Yes.
Let's face it, you've been through quite a bit here. And what I think that's at least shown me, and I think anybody who's heard or seen you before realizes the changes you went through and the persistence that you had to, kind of deal with and do to make those changes, because we don't get an opportunity to plan our life out exactly the way we want it to.
No, we don't. And people say that there are only two things that are certain in life, and that's death and taxes.
Right.
Personally, I think there's three: death, taxes, and change. Change is a given.
Right.
Things don't stay the same. Change is everywhere, and everyone experiences change all the time. Some change is good, some change is not so good.
Right.
Some change is planned, a lot of change is not planned. Change that is planned, and well, in some respects might be planned, sometimes it's not so planned, is like the birth of a baby.
Right.
Okay, and a lot of times some people think it's not the greatest, but most of the time it's a joyful experience. However, afterwards, there's a lot of struggle that goes on with having that baby.
Right.
And that change is not always the easiest to deal with, because there's a lot of difficulties that goes along with having that baby in the way of having adjustments to go along with it. Planning a wedding and having a wedding, that's a glorious time when two people come together to become an actual couple and be married. That can be a wonderful time, and that's a planned change.
Right.
That's something we look forward to, and we have lots of help. There's a lot of excitement that goes on with that. But it's not an easy time either, but that is a planned change. Unexpected changes that come along in our lives are the ones that we do not anticipate. A sudden illness that happens, a car accident that happens that causes a permanent injury, or even just the fact that there's a sudden change in our lives because the car got totaled. Right. That's something we didn't expect. It can cause something permanent, or maybe it even took the life of a loved one. That's a very severe, unexpected change in our lives. And that's something that really affects us on a permanent, long-term basis. Right. And then we have the other changes in our lives that happen along the way. The development of our children, and then as they go through their educational process, they start leaving our nest. That's a change that happens that we anticipate, not always planned, and then sometimes they come back into our house, which is not always planned either, and that's definitely not anticipated. And, birth of grandchildren, and then as we get later in life and we age, the changes that go along with those kinds of things. Right. Those are all changes that go along as we work and we have our employer. Changes that happen in our workplace. Right. Changes in supervision. Changes in our job itself. And this one I'm going through myself. We've had some major changes within our university. And as people have left, we've not been replacing most of them. And as a result, that workload still has to happen, and it gets split up. I'm actually working 2 jobs because we had a person who retired last summer, and I took on part of her responsibilities, and other people in the department took on other portions of what she did. Right. I took on the major service that she was over, and that has totally changed my life, in my work life, and it actually put me on call most of the time. That was a huge adjustment for me. And these are all changes that happen. And as a result, we start finding out how well we handle being persistent at the same time. You know, change and persistence actually go hand in hand. And with some people handle change very well. Some people handle it not so well.
Right.
Some people handle some change incredibly well, but other change not so well either, depending on how personal it is. If it's workplace persistence, no big deal. But workplace change, it's not a big deal.
Right.
But when it affects your personal life, that's a whole different story. When it affects your family, family's a big deal. When it affects your parents, when it affects your children, when it affects your own very personal life, that's a big deal, and that's something that's a lot harder. If you're the main breadwinner in the family and always have been, and all of a sudden you don't have a job, that change is horrific for you.
Right.
And especially if you're having a really hard time finding a job and somebody else in the family has to go to work, that's really hard to take. And it can be very difficult for roles to change. All of a sudden you're the one at home and somebody else is working, and being persistent with that and trying to juggle that and deal with the fact roles have completely changed and maybe you're not so happy about it. And how do you deal with that? And how does the other person in the family deal with that change as well? And where does persistence play into all of this? So that all of that is extremely hard on a family. It's hard on, and what we think is, well, it's just affecting me.
Right.
But it's not.
No,
It
especially
affects,
if you're in a family dynamic, it affects everyone.
Exactly right. Unless you live in a vacuum, it affects your family, and it can affect some of your very close friends too. Because what affects you affects those that are closest to you. It's not just you that is affected.
Right.
You know, we don't live in a vacuum. It affects coworkers around us because we have to have somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
Okay? So we unload on someone, and when we're not happy, those around us can feel it. Whether we talk about it or not, our mood changes, okay?
Yeah.
So when that mood changes and we start getting irritable, we start getting upset, then it's definitely going to come across to others, and it's going to definitely affect them as well.
Right. Now, when you talk about change, and this is one of those things, I think you'd agree, Catherine, and everybody's like, oh, you know, because let's face it, January 1st comes along every year, and people want to make these wholesale changes. Oh, I'm going to do this, and oh, I can't wait till I lose 800 pounds, and you see me in a Speedo, it's going to be awesome. I never want to see anybody in a Speedo, by the way. I'm just saying, but people do want to make these changes. It's just, I think, when those changes are like you mentioned, they're the unexpected changes and the expected changes. When they're the unexpected ones, those are the ones where, like you said, that's where I guess that persistence comes in. And how are you going to deal with it? Because things always change. Whether we want them to or not. Everybody's like, oh, well, I want it to be just like this every day. No, you don't, because that'll never happen. That's static. But we live a dynamic life. Things are constantly changing with us. We're growing older by the day. You know, like you mentioned, employment statuses could change. Family dynamics could change. Everything changes. So I guess what I'm asking is when dealing with that kind of change, how can someone best prepare for it?
One of the ways to prepare, and you can't always prepare, you can't prepare for everything, okay?
Right.
But one of the best things you can do to prepare for any change is to make sure you have a solid support system, okay? And that support system becomes your backbone in making sure that you have more than one person who is your support system. When you're dependent on just one person, what happens is if that person leaves you, or if something happens to that person, and that's the big change in your life, is that that person becomes suddenly extremely ill, or that person becomes involved in a severe accident, and they're not your support anymore. You're supporting them. Who's going to support you?
Right.
So you want to make sure you have a whole support system, not just one person, okay? And that can be a neighborhood. It can be a combination of people and things that you do. One is stress relief. What do you do for your stress relief? Because in dealing with change, our stress goes up. So we have to have a way of relieving our stress. And that's one of the things you have to figure out. How do I relieve my stress? What do I do when I'm stressed? Make sure you have a stress reliever. And then look at the people around you. Who do you depend on when you're stressed? Who do you depend on when things aren't the greatest?
Right.
And make sure that you've got a whole setup. It can be people in your church. It can be people in your neighborhood. It can be people at work. But you actually set up a network of people that you can rely on. Some are closer than others.
Right.
But you have a network of people that you can go to. It's great if you have an organization that you're involved in, or a couple of organizations that you're involved in that you can call on to say, hey, I've got problems, I've got trouble, and I need help.
Right.
And that's always a great place to draw on, is when you're involved in clubs or any kind of organization, to be able to draw on. If you're by yourself and you don't have anyone you can contact, that's the loneliest place in the world to be.
Right. And when you're by yourself, you don't have those, I guess, those influences, those other outlets that you can turn to. You know, much like, say, if somebody reaches out to a resiliency counselor like yourself.
Absolutely.
you can be part of that, I guess foundation is a way to do it, because you want to build that network.
You do.
You know, to kind of give you the support, and give yourself the support, your family the support, the people around you as well, right?
That's right. And there are people, and what I do is different. As a resiliency counselor, what I do is more encouragement and helping people to understand the resources they have to draw on, and the inner resources they have to draw on themselves, and how they can build their own resiliency and be able to understand that they can get through situations by drawing on themselves and drawing on the people around them, and finding resources that they can use to help them get through those problems.
Right.
Because I've been through these problems. And realize too that when people say, and this is a saying that people use, well, you can see that light at the end of the tunnel. Well, I remember the time when my husband and I were afraid to say that, because we felt like that light at the end of the tunnel was the freight train coming towards us about to take us out.
Right.
Because it was nothing but one crisis after another, after another, after another. And we were afraid to even try to plan anything, because we didn't know when the next crisis was going to hit.
Right.
And it was, we just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and that's all we could do. We did have some supports, but not a lot of them. We really were drawing on each other more than anything, and on our faith. That's how we got through it. But because I've had all of that experience, I know what it means to be persistent and how to get through that and come out on top.
Right.
Okay, and by knowing that, I feel like I can really help people to understand what you have to draw on yourself in order to be able to get through things, and be able to then go, okay, who do I have?
Right.
Where can I go? Who else can I draw on to help me get through this? Okay, you need meals. Let's figure out how you're going to find them.
Right. Yeah, because that is something you dealt with, you know, throughout your life. You know, you mentioned right after the birth of your son, a couple of years in, inflicted with this disease. They didn't give him much time. Lo and behold, he's still going.
He's still going, that's for
He's still
sure.
going strong. But during that time, there were other changes that happened. All of a sudden, your health took a turn. That's a change. That affects, again, your dynamic, the family, in terms of the care for your son. Now your husband as well, too, is affected. Your life is affected. You're kind of taken out, so to speak, for,
that's right,
what, 7 or 8 years?
For 8 years, yes.
So now, you know, again, that persistence of trying to find your way through as those changes are occurring. Again, you mentioned the freight train coming. It must have felt like that for a long time.
It did, and it did that frequently. And it wasn't just one time we felt that way. We felt that way many times, that like a freight train was heading towards us, and we're like, don't anybody ask us if we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, because we don't want to go there right now. And eventually, we truly saw light at the end of the tunnel that was good light.
Right.
And we knew that we were actually coming out of the problems, and we were headed towards things turning around for us, and things were actually becoming good.
Right.
And that we were surviving everything and coming out on top of it. But it took a long time for us to get there.
Right. And you said in the meantime, the way you handled it was one step in front of the other.
Right.
It was, you know, you just take it, I guess, take it as it comes. You just deal with it as you're going through it.
But it helps a lot if, when you're going through something like that, you have someone, such as the Resiliency Counselor, to encourage you and say, hey, you can keep putting that one foot in front of the other. You have it within you to be persistent and draw on that inner self, to put that one foot in front of the other, to be able to get up tomorrow morning,
right,
get your kids up, get them where they need to be, and we'll talk again.
Right. Because when you're going through stuff like that, you know, whether it be what we've discussed, you know, your issues or anybody's issues, really, that can be a drain mentally and physically.
It's a horrible drain. And if you're doing all of this stuff totally and completely by yourself, you're not going to make it.
Right.
You know, you really can't. You have to have people that you can talk to at the very least. You have to be able to have someone that you can unload on. And if you're constantly unloading on your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, your significant other, you're going to wear them out too.
Right.
If you're constantly unloading on your best friend, and you don't have a pastor or a counselor or someone else to unload on, you're going to wear them out, because they can't take on your problems either. You have to have someone who is neutral and not directly involved in your problems too, because what happens is they're going to take on your problems too. And when they take them on themselves, they end up feeling the same way you do.
Right.
And they start feeling beat up too, and then you're both beat up, and both of you are trying to put one foot in front of the other together, and it's not a good situation.
Right.
So you've got to have someone who's neutral to be able to talk to,
right,
which is where I can come in.
Right. And you also mentioned, I guess, one of the ways it helped you as well was, you mentioned your faith too, right?
Absolutely. My faith was incredibly important for me. I did have that to draw on, and I was fortunate that I had the examples from my parents. They actually set the foundation for me, or I don't know what I would have done as I was going through it.
Right.
But I also did have people from my church that I could talk to. I had a pastor who was great. He would come in and he'd say, I don't know what to say to you guys, but I want you to know I'm here.
Right.
And he was a big man. He would just sit down and he would just physically be there for us. And throughout our lives, there was always one person who wasn't directly a part of our family who would be there that could help. Right. And just be an unloader that really helped, so that my husband especially could unload. I was not the best at unloading on anybody. I was what we call a stuffer. I stuffed everything. I did not talk to anyone.
Right.
I was not very good at talking or sharing my feelings or sharing what was going on with anyone. I kept it all bottled up, which was one of the reasons why my body fell apart.
Right.
Because it all internalized, and when you do that, which is one of the reasons too why I know people have to be able to get it out. You have to talk. That's one of the reasons why my body fell apart. It's going to come out somewhere. And all that hurt and all that pain and all of that stress finally did when my body fell apart.
Right.
And it took 8 years for me to recover from it. So yeah, I was persistent. And my body crashed because of the way I was persistent.
Right. Yeah,
because it was totally the wrong way to be persistent. And I know the wrong way to be persistent.
Right.
And so now I know the right way to be persistent is to make sure that I have a good, strong support system behind me.
Right.
And by having that, I know what other people really need to set up in their lives. And I really want to be able to help people know how they can set that up and work with them on doing that so that they can learn how to be persistent themselves and how important it is to have those supports and be able to learn how to be persistent. Because it's not, I don't think persistence is something that comes naturally for everyone. It can be a learned behavior, but it's something that you have to be able to see and draw on from someone else who's very good at it.
Yeah, and a lot of times, you know, especially the stuff that we deal with these days, it's a lot different than it was, you know, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Absolutely.
Because it used to be, you know, you got a job, most people stayed at their job for, you know, the entirety of their working life, you know.
Definitely.
But these days, that doesn't happen. That's a lot of change and a lot of turmoil that ends up being in people's lives. And finding the best way to deal with that is always a challenge.
There's no such thing these days as true job security.
Right.
I don't care who you work for. You can work for a major corporation, and you can be shining light one day, and the next day you can be dirt for them, and on the streets. And there's no security there. I don't care what they promise you when they hire you. It could be 1 year, 2 years, maybe 10 if you're lucky. But most likely, you're not going to work there your whole life.
Right.
Most people change jobs, I think it's at least 7 times in their career now, at least that many, and I think it's even more often now. College graduates change jobs about every 2 to 3 years before they find something they really like, and even then, they're not going to stay there as a career.
Right.
Companies don't hire for life anymore. That's just the way life is now. And unfortunately, life happens. And life is not always kind. And that's the hard part about all of this.
Right.
Our life changes that we have are not, because of the way the world is, it's not pleasant most of the time. And that's why we really have got to be resilient, and we have to be persistent if we're going to be able to survive this world that we live in. And that's why this is so important, and that's one of the reasons why I developed this company.
Right. And again, the name of the company is Resiliency Counselor. That is who she is. Her name is Katherine Myers. You can reach out to her through the website resiliencycounselor.com or give her a call directly at 937-405-5795. Hey, let me ask you this, Katherine. Again, we're talking about change and persistence. When someone is going through, say it's a plan change, because, you know, there are a fair amount of those. You mentioned, you know, somebody, you know, planning a child, you know, planning a wedding, stuff like that. But even with those plan changes, there are unforeseen things that kind of come into play, right? Because, you know, say you're planning for the child, but now there's I thought my mom was going to help us raise this kid and teach us what we need to do, and now she's not available, and it's really on us, or, you know, God forbid something worse happens, you know, stuff like that. How do you manage yourself, you know, to kind of get through those unforeseen changes within the change that you had already planned?
Those are hard.
Yeah.
It can be very hard when all of a sudden the person you were relying on to help you is not available, especially when it comes to having that first child. If you don't have a background where you've been around small children or infants, and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, my mom or my sister or my friend is not available to help me, I'm by myself in this,
right.
Okay? Oh my goodness, panic city, okay? And all of a sudden you went from being a very calm, I'm going to have this baby, to someone who's incredibly nervous and upset.
Right.
There are resources out there, and it becomes something that it's very important for you to seek out resources and talk to someone. Okay, I know for myself, I was fortunate. I started babysitting when I was 13.
Okay.
And with infants, okay? So I had a lot of experience before I had my son. And I was a nice, calm mom. He loved being around people, and he was very calm as a baby. So I was very lucky with him.
Right.
But I know that's not the norm, especially these days. Girls don't babysit like they used to. And you don't get that same exposure anymore. So if you don't have that kind of support, it can be very frightening.
Right.
And that's where talking to someone can be very important. Finding moms or joining a mom group can be extremely important. There are mom groups around in different neighborhoods. There are groups, and you don't have to be a member of a church to join them, that are moms, mom-oriented, to help teach moms what to do and to help show moms how to be a good mom, and even to teach them basic mom things to do with changing diapers and doing things with their babies.
Right.
There are all kinds of groups to be able to show them how to even to exercise the baby. There are groups out there to help with those kinds of things. And again, those are resources that I can help show somebody how to do. But it's scary when all of a sudden you feel like the rug's been pulled out from under you,
right,
and you don't know where to go because oh my goodness, I'm due in a month. What am I going to do? I don't have the same resources. And whether you have a spouse or not, if they're going to be able to help some, but you're still the main parent for that baby. And it's like, oh, they don't come with a handbook, I can tell you. They do not come with a handbook.
And they don't come with an off switch or
They
a
do
mute
not
button
come
or
with a
nothing.
mute button. They do not come with an off switch. I can tell you that for sure. They absolutely do not. And problems do happen with newborns. They happen with kids, they happen throughout their lives. Things
Right.
are going to happen. And you're going to have to learn how to deal with those things as they happen and find resources that you can call.
Right.
And sometimes it might be your next door neighbor that you can draw on. And you start looking around and saying, okay, who do I know that's a mom, okay, that I can even call? And those are sometimes the best resources is, okay, who do I know that is a mom who has been through this?
Right.
And sometimes that's how we find our resources.
Right. Now what about, say relationships? Because let's face it, relationships, I think you might agree, are kind of a big deal with some people, right?
They're a very big deal. They are.
And that's something that, let's face it, through the course of a relationship, there are changes going on all the time. I mean, it kind of reminds me of a play. I remember walking past, seeing the big sign is, I love you, you're perfect, now change. That was the name of the play. And it's like, and it kind of makes you jump back like, uh-oh, because that kind of reminds me of, yeah, everything seems great in, say, a relationship at work or personal relationship or, you know, romantic, what have you. And then all of a sudden, some things start to happen.
Relationships are hard, and it takes work to have a good relationship with anyone, whether it be a coworker, whether it be a romantic relationship, whether it be a friendship. They are not easy to do. And what you have to understand first and foremost is you cannot change someone else. Okay, that's number one. You cannot actually set out to change someone. If they do not want to change, they're not going to change. Okay, that I learned a long time ago. And I was married for 42 years with my husband. Okay, I don't think he quite figured that one out with me, but I figured that out with him. If a person is not wanting to change or they are not ready for change themselves, they are not going to change, and you cannot change them yourself. Okay. The only one who can change is that person.
Right.
Okay? They are the only one who can make themselves change. So if you are wanting to go into a relationship with the idea you are going to change someone, you're going into it with the wrong idea. Okay? That's one of the first things I found out with my husband. If you're going about a relationship with the idea, no matter who the person is, again, work, friendship, romantic relationship, with the idea that you can accept that person for who they are, warts and all, then you're going to have a good relationship. Now, you're still going to fight, you're still going to have bumps in the road, but you'll have a much better relationship if you can accept that person for who they are. Now, in work relationships, one of the things that I have found in my own work life is that when you look for a person's strengths, and this is even true in romantic relationships and in friendships, look at the person's strengths, not their weaknesses. If you look for their strengths and you draw on those strengths and you compliment them for those strengths, and you dwell on those, not their weaknesses, you have a much better relationship with that person. Now, if their weaknesses come into play, you always talk to them about their strengths first, then their weaknesses, and then you go back to their strengths. You always take that approach with them, and you then have a much better relationship with them. We have to confront people sometimes about mistakes that they make.
Right.
Okay, we do have to do that. We have responsibilities, especially if you have a supervisory relationship, because that's a whole nother relationship.
Oh, yeah.
You still have to talk to people about things that they have made a mistake with.
Right.
Okay. But if you're a good supervisor, you always make the approach of complimenting someone, talk about what they've done wrong, and then compliment them again. Because then they don't feel blasted.
Right.
And they don't feel like you're attacking them. And we do that in relationships too. We don't ever want to attack a person. We sometimes want to. We sometimes really want to attack them.
Right.
I've been there, where I really wanted to blast a person, but that's not how we get along with people. What we really want to do is treat people the way we want to be treated. And if we do take that approach, we're going to have really phenomenal relationships with people.
Right.
And the more we treat them the way we want to be treated, they're going to treat us the same way. Now, you're always going to run into that person who just, I don't care what you do, they're not going to be very nice.
Right.
But eventually, one of these days, you keep smiling at them, being nice to them, basically taking the love approach. One of these days, they will turn.
Right.
And you will get that kind of an approach back from them.
Well, that's that persistence you're talking about.
It is that persistence. And you have to be persistent in relationships. If you really want them to have a relationship with you, you have to treat them the way you want to be treated.
Right.
And that's what we have to do in any relationship. If we want to have a relationship with someone, we have to treat them the way we want to be treated. We don't treat them the way that we might want to treat them. We treat them the way we want to be treated, okay?
Right.
We don't ever want somebody to bash us over the head, okay? And we might want to treat somebody that way, but that's not the way we want to be treated.
Well,
okay?
and I think a lot of people run into they get caught up in, well, that person's treating me bad, I'm going to treat them the same way.
Exactly.
That
a lot of
thing.
people feel that way.
Right.
And there are times when you really want to do that, okay? I was treated badly, I was treated unprofessionally, I really don't think I should have to be professional towards them.
Right.
Okay? No, that's not the way it works. I had a situation in my office several years ago where I was having to take over for my boss. He was very ill, and actually he took a medical retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an employee who was not doing her job, and I confronted her on it. She then decided she did not like me very well. And I did not know from one day to the next what I was going to deal with her. I decided every day when I went into my office that I was not going to stoop to her level, and that I was going to maintain my level of professionalism.
Right.
There were days when she stood in, there was one day in particular, she stood in my doorway and yelled at me loud enough to be heard throughout the entire department, up one side and down the other, and I just stood there and took it, and walked out of my office later. Once she finally walked away, did not treat her any differently than I ever did, and maintained that throughout the whole time we were going through this.
Mm-hmm.
She never turned around towards me. She eventually walked off the job.
Right. Because
she could not beat me down. But I never treated her the way that I inside really wanted to, which was to beat her up. But my office maintained respect for me because I maintained the level of professionalism that I needed to do.
Right.
I never attacked her. And that's what made, actually our whole, the university decided in my favor on a complaint that she had filed against me because I never did anything she claimed against me.
Right.
But that's the way we're supposed to treat people. And that's the way that I had always taken things, the way I was brought up, and it's the way that we're supposed to do things.
Right.
We're supposed to treat people the way we want to be treated. And actually, if we all took that stance, this whole world would be a whole lot nicer than it is.
That's incredibly true.
You know, and really and truly, we would have much better relationships than we do
right.
if we would approach even a conflict with someone else, a lot better if we would wait and say, okay, hold it. Let's wait, let's calm down. And I had to do this with my husband quite a bit. In his family, they didn't care who they hurt. They would just yell, and they would fight. My family, we did not say anything until we could calm down and not speak in anger. Because my dad brought me up that words spoken in anger can never be taken back, which is very true. So I finally got to the point where I would look at him and say, okay, hold it. I'm not speaking to you until you have calmed down, and so have I. Because we can't take back these words that we're going to say. And he came around to that. He actually did. And things were much better between us because we never said anything that we needed to take back. So we have to be persistent in these relationships to make sure that we're treating people the way we should, especially people that we really care about. And we want to maintain those relationships. We have to take a step back sometimes and say, hold it. Wait a minute, what am I doing? I can't treat this person this way. I need to treat them with love in the way I want to be loved.
Now, is that something where, you know, when you've worked with people, is that something that's come up in terms of a relationship dynamic that they were struggling with?
It has.
It has?
It definitely has. It has come up with my housemate towards his ex-wife. And we're not quite there yet, but we're working on it because he can get pretty angry. As a matter of fact, I got very angry with her not too long ago, and it took me a while to get over it, but I was then able to, I looked at it and reflected it with myself. I didn't take an angry approach with her. I waited until I was through with my anger before I approached her again. And I realized the next time that she approached us with a similar situation, I was able to pick up the phone, call her, and have a really good conversation with her. And actually, she and I get along fine. The two of them still don't, but he's beginning to really understand, and he knows that she touches off his anger quite a bit. And it's really hard for the two of them to have a good discussion, and right now I'm kind of a go-between with them. But it's something that he and I talk about quite a bit because it also happens some with the kids. And he's getting now where he really understands with his children, he cannot respond in anger. And that he's got to back off with them, and he's got to be persistent with that with his kids and really change how he acts with them. And he's really changed a lot in the year and a half that he's been living in my house, and how he works with them and how he reacts to them. And to where he very rarely actually shows his anger with them anymore.
And that's kind of another dynamic that you can help people with, the parent-child dynamic, because that's, let's face it, that's a relationship too.
That's a huge relationship, and parenting is not easy. In parenting teenagers, I'm really discovering how hard that is. They're a whole different ballgame. I work with older teens all the time at work, but those, you know, middle school, high school age kids are not easy to work with because they're trying to be adults, but they're not adults yet. And they're really trying to find themselves too, and trying to find their place in the world as well, and where do they fit. And trying to parent them and make sure they understand authority too, and it's even harder when you've got two households going on too. That's not easy either, and if the two are parenting in two different ways, that makes it even harder. And that's one of the places where we've run into some difficulties, but it's finally coming together where, you know, the kids understand the expectations at our house versus the expectations at their mommy's house.
Now, what about, again, you know, when you're dealing with relationships, you know, you've got we've spoken about, you know, different types of relationships. What about when people are going into a new dynamic? Say they get a new job, they're dealing with a new boss, or they're going to a new college. how do you kind of manage that? Because you come from a certain way of doing things. Maybe you always kind of got your way at home, you know what I mean? And now all of a sudden they let you loose and, okay, go to your 4 years of college and we'll see you on holidays. That's got to be a big transition and a big change as well, right? Because that's, again, that's an expected change with a lot of unknowns attached to it.
That's a very big change. Going to college for the first time is really huge for a lot of young people. These days, a lot of parents have done everything for their kids.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of that.
Yes, they have. They've done a lot for their children.
A little too much.
And yes.
Not saying anything to anybody.
It has been a lot. So we have kids hitting the university, and this is very true for mine. And it's not just the students that I work with that have disabilities, it's kind of across the board.
Right.
We have students hitting the university who have very few coping skills. So when something goes wrong, they really don't know what to do.
Right.
So they're on the phone to mommy, and then mom gets upset because, well, they're supposed to be independent.
Right.
Or we have helicopter parents out the wazoo who are constantly calling the university and going, you're not dealing with my child appropriately, you're not watching after them. Well, that's not our job.
Right.
And the poor kid really wants to be independent but has no clue how. So our student support services in the university then gets kind of run over by students who just want to survive. And so we have to take them by the hand and show them, okay, this is what you do for this is what you do for this,
right.
and this is what you do for this. And we end up having to do a lot of hand-holding. And it's pretty taxing for us as a university
right.
with them.
I would imagine.
And trying to then show them what to do and try to get mom and dad out of the way is what we have to do. Because we've got these helicopter parents who mean well, they really do, but they haven't totally turned off the purse strings. They haven't untied them yet, but they have to realize that these kids have to go out and work.
Right.
And they've got to be independent all the way around. And they've got to learn how to do these things on their own. And it's across the board with them. And it scares us half to death because I look at them and I'm like, these are the people who are going to take care of me when I get old. It's scary. But they do come around if we can get the parents to stay out of the way.
Right.
And when we get the parents to take a back seat, and I know in our department, we can spend quite a bit of time on the phone with the parents and saying, okay, let us do our jobs. And if you let us do our jobs, then we can handle things with your young person.
Right.
We can show them what they need to do. We will work with them, but please let us do our jobs.
Right. And a lot of times that is, I guess, the persistence that they're lacking, that they've got to learn at some point.
It is. They have to learn it, and they do. They can. They're quite capable of learning it. And that's what mom and dad don't realize, is that those kids really can learn how to be persistent and do things on their own. They just need to let us teach them.
Right.
And it can take the whole 4 years for some of them. Others it takes 1 year, others it takes 2. But they're capable of learning it. We just need mom and dad to kind of help support us in pushing them, because it takes pushing and nudging them and saying, okay, you can do this. Instead of, no, I can't. Yes, you can. And getting them to help support us in encouraging those students and encouraging them and showing them what they need to do, and then expecting them to do it, and having mom and dad then expect them to do it also instead of doing it for them.
Right. Now, can you work with, say there are parents out there that, you know, for one thing or another, that they've been involved in every aspect of their kid's life, right? You know, I'm putting their socks on, I'm doing this, they're 14, what are you doing? You know, and I think that's part of what you're kind of referring to in a way, is like, you know, doing way too much. Let these kids figure these things out, because they're going to need to do things on their own at some point. You're not going to be able to, you know, get them dressed and ready for their first bank job, so to speak.
That's right.
You know, they're going to have to learn these things. Are there ways that you can help work with parents to kind of help them with their kids in learning these things?
Definitely. We can help parents, and I can definitely help parents to understand that they need to start backing off, and start backing off actually when their kids are in elementary school, even younger than that, to help encourage their kids to do things by themselves.
Right.
And to take a back seat, watch Johnny fall, let their kids fail. And this is the hard one for parents.
Yeah.
This is really, really tough, is to understand that your child has the right to fail. And let them, that's how they learn. Let them make mistakes, because that's how they learn, that's how they grow, is by making a mistake.
Right.
Let them do the dishes, and okay, if they break one, don't let them do the good china. Okay, don't let them do that.
Right.
Start them out with plastic stuff, okay? But let them do the dishes. Teach them how to do their laundry. And teach them early, okay? Don't wait until they're graduating from high school to show them, or their first day in college to show them. Teach them while they're at home.
Right.
Let them do these things, and okay, if something turns pink in the laundry, tell them not to put red stuff in there with their whites again.
Now
okay?
you've learned.
Now you've learned. That's the first way, that's one of the best ways for guys to learn. Don't put your red shirt in with your white clothes, okay?
Right.
They won't do it again, okay? That's how kids learn, by letting them do and make a mistake. It's okay.
Right.
And so what? Okay, if it's your old everyday stuff, let them wash it, and if something breaks, okay, it's not the end of the world. And what we have to remember in teaching parents and kids persistence is that we don't sweat the small things.
Right.
We worry about the big things in life, not the little bitty things. Because right now, young people freak out at the little stuff.
Oh yeah, and a lot of times
it doesn't take much.
Yeah, and a lot of times their parents are right there with them.
They are.
Freaking out with them.
It's exactly right. They all freak out at the same little things, and I'm like, okay, let's all sit down and just cool off. Let's calm down, and let's focus on something not quite so that you don't think is quite a big deal, and let's talk about how small this is.
Right.
You know, and they're sweating over little bitty things that don't matter. And that's what they need to all learn. And yes, I can work with parents on these kinds of things and how to transition kids.
Right.
Because I've worked on transition for 24 years now.
Yeah. Because that's been a big part of the work you've done at Wright State University, correct?
Yes, yes, that is a big part of what I've done, is dealing with kids on transition. And the longer I've been there, the harder it's gotten, because of the way parents have become more helicopter parents than they have been. Actually, they're becoming drone parents because of the way they move.
Yeah.
They really hover over their kids now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's like little Johnny and little Jessica didn't get a trophy today. Uh-oh, what happened?
Yeah.
Why did you not give them a trophy? Instead of, you know, why did they not earn something?
Right. Exactly. We have to look at, okay, what did they not earn, instead of why didn't they get?
Right.
And look at that earning pattern instead.
And I think that stems back to also to changing that mindset of you're supposed to get everything you want.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. Kids think that right now, and this is a major change that has happened in our society with the way that kids think, is that they're supposed to get everything that they want,
Right.
not everything that they need. And we need to go back to the everything we need, not everything that we want. And kids need to understand that they need to earn what they want.
Right.
And they need to be persistent in that earning. Now, what's really neat is when you see someone, because we do have them, there are ones that are incredibly persistent when they come in. They have their act together. They know what they want. They know exactly how to study. They come in. I have one who, she's the Vice President of Student Government, and this is her 3rd year at Wright State. She knows exactly what she's doing. She has scholarships. She does everything on her own. I haven't seen much of her, except when we're awarding her something.
Right.
That's about the only time I see her. And that's because she's so busy. She's often, and when I see her in the hallway, I'll ask her, I said, do you ever sleep? And she's like, very little. And those are great, but you just don't see very much of them.
Right.
We see so much of the other ones who need to learn how to persist.
Yeah, and again, that's going to build not only, when you're talking about the persistence, because you mentioned earlier today about, building that kind of network, that framework to have people to rely on, people to look to, maybe resources to kind of reach out to in case there are issues.
Absolutely.
Because not everything's going to go according to the script, according to plan. Yes, you plan out the perfect vacation. You're going on vacation. It's going to be a wonderful, honeymoon, but all of a sudden the weather in the Bahamas is terrible. So what are you going to do about it? You're going to sit there and cry in the room? No, you're going to figure out different ways to make sure that that's a great, honeymoon, vacation, what have you, right?
That's right. There are bumps in the road no matter what you do.
Yeah.
You're always going to have them. So you have to have a backup plan, or you have to be the kind of person who can go, okay, let's just change gears. Or, okay, I have a plan B. I can just go this direction instead.
Right.
If you're not that kind of personality, then always have a plan B in your back pocket. Or sometimes a plan C or a plan D. We always had at least a plan B, a C, and a D, because sometimes plan B wouldn't work either, or C or D,
right.
Okay? So you learn how to be flexible. And that's part of being persistent, is learning how to be flexible in what you do. We can't be rigid in the society anymore because of all the changes that take place.
Right.
You have to learn to be flexible, and you have to learn to be able to go with the flow sometimes. Because if you're going to be really rigid in everything that you do and everything that goes on, you're going to be incredibly unhappy, and you're also going to really struggle with everything that goes on in your life because of all the change that takes place. If you can be persistent with it, you learn how to be flexible at the same time.
Yeah, and you learn to be resilient as well.
Yes, you do.
Right?
You definitely learn how to be resilient, too.
Yes, exactly. And if you're looking for a resiliency counselor, this is who we're talking about, Katherine Myers. She is the owner of the Resiliency Counselor. Her website, resilienccounselor.com, or call her at 937-405-5795. And again, there are various things that you do. Now, when people reach out to you for the first time, how do you go about deciding, okay, here's our course of action? Do you work with everybody that you reach out to, or that reaches out to you, I should say?
It's not appropriate with everyone.
Okay.
And I decide that during a first meeting.
Okay.
And that one is absolutely no charge at all.
So you get a free consultation to
Free
start with.
consultation to start with. And during that, we kind of get acquainted, see what the problem is, and if it's something that's really appropriate for me or not. And if it's not, I'll do my best to help refer them to someone else.
Right.
Or someone in their area or in the right field.
Right. And again, it's all about using what you've learned throughout the years.
Absolutely.
Not only through your personal life, your professional life, but your personal life as well, and kind of bringing it all together.
Very definitely. I use what I have learned through my son, through my husband, through my own life, and then through my professional life.
Right.
And all that I have gone through, and all that my students have taught me, and their parents as well, because I work with their parents. So I've worked with parents, students, I've worked with families. There's not much that I have not experienced.
And you probably learn something new every day with the people that you come in contact with, right?
I do. It's amazing. There are times when I'm like, okay, I thought I knew everything, but I sure don't. They'll throw a new curveball at me.
Right, yeah. And that's another benefit of working with someone. Again, we've been talking about change and persistence. But again, the whole underlying fact of those things is because, let's face it, you can't deal with any kind of change or be persistent unless you're resilient, because things will come up that you're not expecting.
That's right. They will. They will happen all the time, and they will happen just about every day in your life. You'll go through a day and you'll think, oh, well, nothing really happened to me today. But you think about it, and there's going to be little bitty changes that you just totally ignore. But then there's going to be the days when you're going to have some big changes that will happen. Again, planned, unplanned, and then there's going to be the really huge ones that happen in your life that are going to really take you for a loop.
Right.
And you really need to be prepared for those big changes that happen in your life.
Yeah, and those changes can be They can come out of left field sometimes.
They can, and those big changes are totally life-changing.
Right.
And ones that will come out of left field and be ones that you never would have thought would have ever affected you.
Right.
And you hope, and I hope and pray don't affect people, but these days they do.
Yeah.
Things can happen totally unexpected, and you would have never thought it would affect your family,
yeah.
or one of your coworkers, even somebody close to you. And those are the kinds of things that that we're talking about, especially.
Yeah, and especially if you're looking for someone like Katherine, reach out to her. She'll work with you no matter where you're located.
Absolutely. With Skype, I'm not tied down to people in my area in Ohio. Skype is great. So is the phone.
Yeah.
You know, the phone is great. We have with cell phones, long distance calls don't cost anything.
Yep.
Skype is great. That way we can be face to face. If you are in Dayton, we can always find a way to meet face to face.
Right.
So I'm not tied down.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for somebody to come and talk to a group, I can actually be mobile.
There you go. So reach out to her, the Resiliency Counselor, resilienccounselor.com, or give her a call, 937-405-5795. And again, Katherine, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You're very welcome.